Setting up now. Okay, we're live.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Alternative Preparation, Educator Preparation Application Review Committee. It is Monday, April 6th at 2:02. Melissa, can you read the roll, please?
And Member Kim, I have that, Member Peasley, I'm sorry, I have that ready to go if you want me to do that one.
Okay, thank you, Catcher.
So Member Garcia?
Here.
Member Reedy?
Here.
Member Robledo?
Here.
Member Aragon?
Here.
And Member Peasley?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to turn the leadership role of this committee over to Catcher Baden. This will facilitate more efficient communication because in this online environment with delays, it can be difficult and a struggle. So Catcher, thank you so much for agreeing to do this for us in advance. I'm going to turn the meeting facilitation of this meeting over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. And first, I just want to thank everyone for being flexible on doing this virtually. This is our first public meeting of the board that's being done through Zoom. And so for that reason, we're going to ask for a little bit of patience as we work through this. Obviously, we're doing this all virtually right now to adhere to CDC guidelines and some of the other orders out from the state. And so we had to, similar to our board meeting, disallow public members from being in physical meeting room space. And so the only way that the public is able to access this right now is through the live stream. So Melissa's going to be monitoring that a lot, and so am I. And so if that live stream ever kicks out at any point, we got to make sure we stop where we are to let it get back up, because like I said, that's really the best and only way to access the meeting right now. And while I'm at it, just huge thanks to Melissa for working, and also Jessica on our staff for working to get this set up and going. Although you guys are all the first committee to get this done through this format, this is actually a good test run because this is probably the format that we're going to try to use at our next board meeting. So you guys are kind of our guinea pigs. And because it is virtual, there's a little bit of things that we had to make concessions about. One of those is the public comments. Sometimes folks can submit those in person. We had to restrict that obviously because there are no in-person availability, but we did allow, just like with the board meeting, people to submit public comments electronically, and we would read those into the record, and we'll get to that when we get to that agenda item. All of the materials for today's meeting are on Simbly, and it's actually the screen that's getting shared right now. That's where all of our board materials are. If you go to our website, azspe.az.gov, there's on the calendar page all of our meetings that are coming up. If you click on this one, a new screen will pop up with a big header that says view meeting materials here. You can click that and it takes you to this page here. So this is really what we're working off of for this meeting and for most of our meetings, as a matter of fact. So just a couple rules of the road as we get through this, and you probably, as everybody is working on a lot of these virtual meetings and calls over the past couple of weeks, these are probably the same rules of the road that you've been working with, or if you've been working with your kids in your classrooms, it's probably the same stuff. We just ask that you mute your phone when you're not speaking. We have some limited capability when we mute people, because that ends up in some cases inadvertently kicking them off potentially, and we have problems getting them back in. So please, be cognizant of when your mic is open or not. As another big reminder, the meeting is still live streamed, and a lot of times, even if we are sharing this screen, as you can see, sometimes there's some other screens popping up. So just be aware that as we are with all of our meetings that are also live streamed even before all this pandemic, that everything's on the record and getting live streamed on YouTube right now to make sure it's accessible. So please be cognizant of that, and that your face might still show up or whatever you're displaying on your camera when you're speaking. Something else, a couple other things specific to this. Please refrain from using the text chatting feature in here unless you're having some sort of connectivity issues or something's not working right with the call. Mostly because we want to make sure that all the discussions are happening in a way that the public can view it. But if you are having issues, shoot an email to Melissa and myself, and we'll try to work through those as best we can. And again, just asking for your patience as we move through this. So I'm just gonna pause real quick, and unless there are any questions, we'll move to the call to the public. So I guess I'll just kind of leave it open. If there are any questions on the process and how we're going to work through this, I'll go into more detail on how we'll work with the application itself. Okay. So the first item on the agenda is the call to the public. Ordinarily, we would give a big spiel about this, the time for the public to comment, and those are the instructions that you see on the screen that's getting shared now on how to accept those written comments and how we would read them. We have not received any public comments yet, so I think we can just move straight on to the next agenda item, which is the only real agenda item that we have for action today, which is Washington Elementary School District's application for their classroom-based preparation program. And Washington L is on the call with us, a couple of representatives from them. They do have a presentation. So what we're going to do, how we're going to format this is similar to the way we've done it before, but with a couple little tweaks. So we're going to hand the reins over once I'm done here to Washington L, and they'll give a presentation on their application. We're just asking that committee members ask all of their questions after the presentation is over. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each committee member, and I'm going to ask if you had any questions or comments or concerns, and try to get them all out as you can in that time. And then I'm going to move on to the next committee member, and we'll ask you to do the same, and then we'll move on to the next committee member. And that's for the whole application, including the presentation. So try as you're going through to compile all your questions and comments and concerns. And of course we can come back to you, but we're trying to structure it this way so that way we don't have a lot of folks accidentally talking over each other. In-person committee meetings, that's not as big of a concern, but here trying to keep it a little more structured than normal, just so that we have a little more order in how we go through it. Sorry, I'm going through my notes here to see if I was missing anything. So after that, of course, we'll make a recommendation, and that'll go in front of the board at its April 20th board meeting. So before I hand it over to Washington L, I just did want to point out one thing for the committee members, not process, but actually on the application and the question in front of you today. Remember, this committee reviews all prep program applications, and those are the ones that come from the higher education institutions and other institutions. But it also are those that come from these classroom-based preparation program pathways. So if you remember, we've only seen one of those prior to today, and that was from Vail Unified School District. And these classroom-based pathways are a slightly different, although it's alternative prep, it's different than the pathways that we normally consider. So the alt ed pathways from those other IHEs and whatnot, we have the big application, we have the rubric, and we tally up the scores and all that kind of good stuff. On the classroom-based applications, we do not have a rubric, and there's not as comprehensive as an application package, as you've probably noticed. And part of that reason is because state statute does limit our ability, or not necessarily our ability, it limits what we can review, what we can evaluate. And it's It's solely the efficacy of the program. And so some of the other things that Washington L even provided, for example, are helpful and potentially useful, but even statute says it's for information only in a lot of cases. And so I guess that I just want to remind the committee members as best as possible. It is a little bit different, and I understand that's a bit of a shift from the way that we normally think about things, but that's the reason why. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Justin and Maggie with Washington Elementary, and they will give that presentation. And like I said, just a reminder, please try to let them run through that whole presentation, and then we'll ask questions at the very end of it. So with that, Maggie and Justin, you guys are up.
Thank you, Catcher. Thank you, board. I'm going to present a PowerPoint. Give me 1 minute, please. Just a few things. Again, thank you for your time and this new experience with the video conferencing as a board meeting. To give you a little bit of history, over last school year, over a year ago, I asked that the Arizona Department of Education present to HR professionals among different school districts regarding an opportunity for us to have an educator prep program and the details regarding it. Going into this school year, I had both small and large committees comprising of master teachers, principals, district leadership, and greatly appreciated the Arizona Department of Ed sent representatives to participate as well in what will ultimately be what we're recommending to you, our Washington Elementary School District Bridge Educator Preparatory Program. We do have a couple programs in place already, and I want to go just a little bit over it. Please note the Bridge program we're going to recommend is actually quite an enhancement over the two programs we currently provide. But for over 30 years, we've had a 3-year new hire teacher induction program. We called it the Begin program. This was intended for those with the standard teacher certificate. We do have a Begin 1, Begin 2, Begin 3, hence the 3-year program. And each year we have over 300 teachers in one of those years in the Begin program. I did provide some data to kind of share with you, and I apologize, my screen shows me, there we go. And I looked at this year's data, comparing our Begin teachers in year 3 compared to all teachers in our school district, and we have about 1,400 teachers. And I'm looking at, or we're looking at benchmark data in the district, and it's the percent gains from the beginning of the year, the pre-assessment to the mid-assessment, December. I'm providing you ELA, the language arts, and then also math. And you'll notice that the Begin 3 teachers had a comparable percent gains compared to all teachers, over 9% in language arts. For math, it actually was a little bit greater at 14%, a little over 14% compared to 13%. Back in August 2017, Arizona allowed for more opportunities for the alternative pathways. And immediately our school district actually made some staffing adjustments in order to provide staff and resources to teachers we were hiring with the alternative pathway certificate, for lack of better terms. And we called this the START program. It was an induction program for our new hire teachers who were not standard certified. Please note that after their year in the START program, they went to what is now our Begin program. So these individuals actually, when it's all said and done, will go through 4 years of an induction program. Here I use the same benchmark data. I'm comparing the alternative pathway teachers who are in the START program compared to the standard certified teachers. In ELA percent gains, you'll see that they actually made higher gains compared to the standard certified teacher. However, it was opposite with the math, with a couple of percent difference. Just for your information, I did want to share with you some data that we have for this school year regarding both our START and our Begin programs. To your left, you'll see the alternative standard versus standard certified. This goes a little bit more in depth, and I just targeted some grade levels. So you'll see in the math benchmark, our first grade had 27.4% gains compared to the 31.6% standard. You'll see the count. Right now, we have 4 first grade alternative certified teachers in the START program compared to 87 total first grade teachers. Fourth grade, only a 0.2% differential. For math, there was a little over a 1% difference, but in our cross-categorical behavior special ed program, you'll see actually we had greater gains than our standard certified special ed teachers. To the right is our Begin teachers, and this is only those who are in their 3rd year. So they've already completed Begin 1, 2, and they're halfway through Begin 3. Again, I'm comparing the same grade levels and subject areas, the percent gains, and I was just giving you the count of employees who meet that criteria. So we have 14 first grade teachers who are in their 3rd year in the Begin program, for example. And you'll see that most of them, with the exception of math and CCB, the middle school math and CCB are pretty comparable. With the CCB and math, unlike ELA, you'll see in a few minutes, the math was a little bit lower as far as the results. With that said, there was also a smaller number of individuals in that program. This next chart, shows our ELA benchmark data compared to different grade levels. I was not able to use the exact same grade levels or criteria as I shared with you in the math, just because grade levels get just different testing. But what I'm showing you here is I maintained the 4th grade and I maintained the CCB. I replaced first grade with 6th grade ELA. Language arts is still middle school. It's just language arts versus math. And then I also added a resource kiddos in special ed. So in the alternative versus standard certificate, the START program versus just all of our teachers with the standard certificates, again, you'll see some comparable numbers. Matter of fact, 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade language arts had higher percent gains than the standard certified overall gains. Same thing with CCB. You'll see that the percent gains was quite considerable than the standard certificate. To the right is the 3rd year Begin. This is the 3rd year teacher overall experience who completed Begin 1 and 2, and now they're halfway through Begin 3. And you'll see that some of it's comparable and some of it's a little bit short than what our overall teachers are experiencing. Some of it will have to do with the counts. The smaller the count, one teacher could vary it by a lot, as you know. A little bit about the Bridge program. It's the Educator Preparation Program, the EPP. It prepares non-college of education degreed faculty to receive a classroom-based standard teacher certificate. The reasons why we want to provide this opportunity is it develops teachers to match our expectations and the needs of our students. It recruits, invests, and retains alternative pathway teachers. As you're quite aware, the state of Arizona is hiring a lot of alternative pathway teachers. And if we're going to put in a commitment to them, we want to invest in them and retain them moving forward. You'll know that the program provides not just coursework, but also job-embedded training and coaching. We're providing evidence-based professional development. And it also removes barriers for interested bachelor degree candidates. And I have 2 examples to share with you. Last year, I had an individual who came from the business field to teach. The individual met with me in the spring and had started documenting all of the hours he was working as a teacher, as well as going to school at night and doing homework and all that, studying and all that stuff. And he was averaging 85 hours per week. He said it was the most work and hardest job he's ever had. And unfortunately, he did not continue as a teacher this school year. I also had another teacher who, a younger gentleman with a young family, newlywed with a young child, was an earner as far as salary in the family, and did not have the time or the money, the resources to go to school at night to pursue his post-bac, for example, while teaching. And in his first year, he was making considerable progress as a teacher, and unfortunately did not continue as a teacher because of those barriers. So part of what our interest is in providing this program is not to just grow our teachers, but also to remove barriers and allow for some more opportunities for them. Overview of our bridge program. It will be a 2-year model. There is a potential for 3 if we identify certain individuals that need 1 more year, similar to post-bac programs, et cetera. The program teachers will have an extended work calendar. They will not follow along with the standard teacher work calendar. They're going to start in mid-July for 2 weeks. And Dr. Westhoff will go a little bit more deeper into this for coursework. We are going to have them work 2 days during fall break and 2 days during spring break. That's a typical week off for teachers. In this case, these individuals will have 3 days off, a 5-day weekend versus a full week, and those 2 days will be coursework. We are going to provide professional duty release for professional development twice a month, in which we provide a substitute for his or her classroom, and we pull that teacher for PD. And then we also have a couple additional days at the very end of the school year in which we're working with these individuals. Washington Elementary School District has designated 2.0 FTE to work solely with the bridge program. This does not include other staff that we will leverage, including master teachers who will be assigned as a mentor teacher. And with that said, I will ask that Dr. Westhoff carry us through the remaining of the slides.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for fitting us in today in these times where we're all learning lots of new skills. The next part of the presentation is about the actual content of the Bridge program. And I'd just like to start off first by saying we had a wonderful large group committee and then a smaller working team that was composed of principals, district office staff, coaches, and Justin. And every one of them was very committed to building a teacher that was going to make a difference for students. And we have worked alongside some of our alternative certified teachers over the last couple of years and watched them really struggle with the amount of hours that it was taking for them to earn that certificate, as well as try to be a quality teacher while they were learning on the job. And when Justin brought forward this opportunity that we might be able to apply to have a special program, we were very committed. And I think you'll be able to see from not only the application that you were given, but by the things I'm going to share with you, that this group really dug deep and thought about a teacher and kind of unwrapped a teacher and also unwrapped the school year. And the reason that was important is the fact that everybody wants a new teacher to learn everything all at the same time, and we know that doesn't happen. So our goal was to figure out what were the big chunks of content, and I don't mean science, social studies, and reading and math, but the big chunks of skills that a professional educator needs to have to really have a classroom where children are thriving emotionally and physically and also academically. And then we took that content, we tried to figure out, all right, so these people are walking in, not really knowing the rhythm and routine of a school year or even of a school day, and probably have had 2 or 3 children at home or nieces or nephews, but never have had 26 to 32 in their classroom all at one time. I had to chuckle these last couple of weeks with parents and the things they've been posting. I said, this is really the heyday for teacher recognition, because they're all dealing with 1 and 2 or 3 at home, and they're realizing that the teachers are dealing with large classrooms of their children and everybody else's children. So it'll either attract a lot of people to our profession, or people will start leaving quickly, not wanting to join the profession. We hope it's the latter. And that's why this program is so important to us. We, as we laid out the content, We looked at the strands of things that they should learn. We also want to align it to our teacher evaluation instrument that we have in Washington School District, so that what we were spending time on was not only evidence-based, but also aligned to the expectations that their administrators would be evaluating them on. We did several drafts, and when we finally came down to our final draft that you're seeing in the application, the actual face-to-face time with the people that would be providing the professional development was about 150 hours. And our really concentrated effort was to try to make as much of it on contract time as possible. Because if we really want them to be good planners, they have to plan for each day and not just coursework that they're taking to be a teacher. And that's what we were seeing. The rate of exhaustion was trying to keep up with the dailiness in the classroom while also trying to keep up with the coursework that they were taking. So we started off with a couple of guidelines, I guess you would say, that we were going to follow. One is that anything that they learned would be comprehensive in nature, developmental in nature, that it would be embedded always in classroom experiences and practice. No term papers, no research papers, things like that. It would be things they would go and use the next day and the next week in their classroom. That it would be systemic in the sense that not only would their content ebb and flow with the school year, but also it would be systemic to fit within the Washington School District. What they were learning would be what they needed to learn as Washington teachers. And then finally, that our learning for them would be equitable for each participant in the Begin program, but it would also be differentiated. And that was really important to us because each one of these people will grow at their own rate, just like children do in a classroom. The other important part of the concept that Justin mentioned is that we wanted the whole program to be job embedded. And even though we have 150 hours of professional development face time, that's not counting the number of hours that the Bridge coaches will be invested inside the classroom, shoulder to shoulder with them. But also we have school-based coaches that will be doing follow-up between visits. We also will have a highly qualified master teacher that will be their mentor. And so with those job embedded pieces, along with the face-to-face training, we feel that that will give them the most evidence-based and also developmentally appropriate training. The second bullet talks about the actual part of in the classroom. The coaches that will be working with these Bridge participants will be doing co-planning. They will be doing modeling. They will be doing whisper coaching by taking them to see other people teaching. We've been growing a lot in the area of videotaping and then conferencing on the captured videotape. The whole piece requires a lot of communication with the Bridge teacher and the school leadership. So we've also kind of taken another side strand where we're going to be working with the site administrator and the school coach and bring them along with the content that we're introducing each session, so that when a Bridge participant leaves a session, that will be their focus of their learning to go back and try and implement and be coached with. And then the school administrator and the school coach will also know what they're bringing back to work on that month. Justin, I think you can change the slide. Thanks. This first bullet talks about that it's not just content that our teachers will need to acquire. We are a Title I district, and our children come from homes of poverty, homes of different languages, homes where they are changing schools frequently with a lot of academic gaps. And our goal is to help these people really understand our student and not make it easy for them because they feel sorry for them, but know how to build a classroom that is challenging, accepting, relationship built with families, and also work on growth mindset and all the pieces of the social emotional part of our children as well. We've looked at a lot of research on poverty, which we have for years in our district, and we know that that relationship piece is critical. But it's not just the relationship piece. You also have the high expectations, the mindset, the growth mindset piece that students will learn to know that they can learn and that we expect them to learn, even though our relationship piece is also a strong component. The other piece of our students that are bridge candidates will have to learn is the whole piece of the trauma sensitive information that we've all been gathering information about. Our students sometimes are in very difficult homes, and on the average, a teacher and their family doesn't look anything like some of our children's families. And so I will tell a funny story from 2 years ago. One of our START applicants had been a PD person with doctors in the operating room. And he was interviewing with the principal at one of our pretty complex schools for a first grade position. And the principal said, what are you going to do if the student says to you blankety blank and then runs out the door? And the gentleman said, oh, my kids don't do that in school. And the principal said, well, I'm trying to explain to you that some of our children will have days like that. And they talked and they talked. And finally, the START person said, are you trying to scare me off? And he said, no, I just don't want you to be shocked when these things happen, because these are our children and we embrace them and we love them and we help them work through their issues. But it's not going to look like your children's, that you will maybe have seen at all your relative functions and in your own home on a daily basis. So I think that's part of the magic of being in a Title I district. I've been with Washington for 44 years. And that's the love I have for it, is that I really believe our children will learn and they can learn and they should be expected to learn. But we have to weave that, the arms of support around them and their families at the same time. So that's a piece we really want to embed to our bridge people, because we don't want them to leave out of frustration that the families aren't cooperative or following through or coming to conferences. We learn how to communicate with our families in another way. So it's not only the content piece that we'll be working on, but it's also the nature and the characteristics of our families and children that they'll be learning to love and work with. The next bullet talks about all the resources that we've consulted and we're still digging in. And as I said, our small work team is very committed. So we've continued to keep working even though we've been waiting for this meeting. And then the last one is the next slide. So Justin, you can go ahead and change it. As I said, when we were developing the content, we looked at the rhythm and routine of a school year. We looked at the total picture of what a skillful teacher needs to know and be able to do. And then we started to categorize them into strands. And so these are the strands, and it's just circular in nature because they can't learn each one of those boxes one at a time, and they can't learn everything about each of those boxes on the diagram at a time. So our whole plan, and in your application, you can see our actual agendas for each session, is that we introduce what the person will need for the next month. So before school starts, we will do an equity session, we'll do a classroom management session, we'll do the planning session, the things that a teacher would need to know and be able to do to have the first successful 2 weeks of school. And then that will come from a variety of those strands. And then as the school year progresses, we'll go back and revisit each strand as a new piece or a deeper piece or a more complex piece needs to be developed. The school year itself has a rhythm and routine related to assessment, related to vacation times and how children adjust to being in school and out of school. So each one of these boxes we will be dealing with frequently, but at different levels of depth, depending on what is needed at the time of the school year and for the content and the kinds of students that grade level they'll be working with. I think you can change the slide, Justin. We've talked a lot about supporting our bridge participants and how are we going to know their skills and what they need. And even though we have sketched out a real detailed agenda for year one, we also know that that will have to be fairly fluid based on actually the people and the grade levels and the positions they're in. Kindergarten, first grade bridge person would need a different skill set in some areas than a 7th grade or 8th grade math teacher. So we luckily and beautifully, we have an academic services department that has content instructional specialists, and they are content specialists as well as coaching specialists. And so we will be embedding them throughout the program. We will be differentiating based on what each type of teacher would need. For example, our K1s are going to need a heavy phonics emphasis, and our math teachers are going to need another whole piece of training related to the 3 strands we've been training on for the last several years. And so luckily we have experts in those areas that will be helping us then differentiate the actual content training for our bridge participants that are necessary for their particular job assignment. The other piece we've talked a little bit about is what if we have a special education bridge applicant? And we really would like to start a special education strand, but that's going to take another whole set of skills and maybe what we come back to you in the future. But we're not adverse to having a special ed student, bridge participant, because we feel like we have enough resources that we can also support them. We also have a set of special education coaches that work with our special education teachers, and they would love to be involved, not only with just special education teachers, but working with gen ed teachers on how to work with special ed kids who are included in the general classroom. So that piece of support, besides just the people assigned to the bridge program, is very deep and very eager to be involved in this project. As we progress through year 1 and we move into year 2, we'll still be addressing the same strands, but we'll take a heavy look at our participants as we go through year 1 with several tools that we've talked about. One is that we want to create a rubric that would almost be an evolving rubric throughout the first year. Things that we would need to look at them implementing in the classroom after each training, as well as general management procedures and professionalism procedures, and then of course, student relationship procedures. So as we develop these rubrics for observations and walkthroughs, we'll also be working with the site coach and the building administrator to create inter-rater reliability with these rubrics. So the bridge coaches will be using them, the building administrators we're going to ask to use them, and then the site coaches we will ask to use them. That data will help us paint a very big picture, a complete picture of our bridge participants, and we can begin tailoring some of their specific coaching needs or their training needs, especially moving into that second semester and into year 2. The other piece is the mentor, who is a site-based teacher, hopefully at their grade level. That's not always possible, so we'll look for a master teacher either on grade level, a grade below, or a grade above. And we will do special training with those mentors so that we can teach them not only the skill of mentoring, but what their role and responsibilities would be, and how to observe and collect data on their mentee. The other piece that we want to do, and Justin and the committee and I have talked about this, is we've done some reading about what we call a staying interview. A lot of times districts will offer an exit interview, but we were reading some information about conducting staying interviews, STAYING, throughout the year to really talk to the bridge participants about their reactions, their feelings, their needs from their perspective, and not just from people watching them from the outside. So that's another piece we want to build in to our model. So we'll have the district teacher evaluation instrument. We'll have these rubrics, these observation instruments. We're going to have mentor logs. We're going to have the coaches for the bridge program and their observations and tracking of their modeling and co-teaching and videotaping. And then as that first year comes to an end, we'll make a decision about do they need to repeat year 1 with the basics, or can they move on into year 2 and get into more complex levels of each of those strands. As we move through year 2, part of what we think we would like to do, and again, this is planning because we haven't really done it yet, but we'd like to maybe tailor year 2 to be very individualized for the most part, so that each person can grow at the speed in which they are ready to absorb and to add to their repertoire. Some things might be group topics because of what's happening in the district with our initiatives, or also with just that skill set for a second year teacher. And other things might be very individualized. So we've kind of talked about maybe each bridge participant in year 2 having an individual growth plan if they become very diverse in their needs and experiences. You want to go to the next slide, Justin? Oops, that's the end of that content. I did want to talk for just a second before I turn it back over to Justin and then you all for your questions. As I've said, our group that's met for the last year and a half or so has talked a lot about really focusing on that whole concept of being job embedded and also being intensive in our coaching and our modeling. When Justin and I were looking at some of the data he's collected about the begin teachers and the alternative certified teachers, and then our standard teachers, one of the things we know is that our begin program is a wonderful support model, but there aren't enough people to follow them into the classroom with intensity as there are like in the bridge program and the start program. So we see that as a real benefit to really building these teachers maybe at a quicker pace and at a more solid pace, because they will have some kind of instant or instantaneous support happening when things are starting to struggle. When you have 300 begin teachers, we don't have that many personnel to follow every one of them frequently throughout the school year into the classroom. We utilize our site coaches and our administrators, of course, but they also have the whole rest of the buildings to support. So we're very excited about this model because it's really going to give us some knowledge and some skills in the whole area of intensive job embedded professional development. And then we looked finally at the change research about initiation of a new program or project, and then the implementation of it, and then finally the institutionalization of it. And we call that the 3 I's of change. So we really want to take each step of this model, should you approve it, and follow that sequence to make sure that each of them is a strong step and a strong year, so that eventually we can have this as an institutionalized path for teacher certification in Washington School District. Thank you for your time, and I hope I didn't go over the time.
And with that, any questions, board?
Okay, so members, I'm going to go alphabetically with the chair and the vice chair going last. So Member Garcia, that means that you are the lucky one to go up first in terms of asking questions, stating any comments or concerns that you might have. If you are not ready, then I can go down to Member Reedy. So we're going to go Member Garcia, Member Reedy, Member Robledo, Member Aragon, and the Madam Chair bringing up the rear. So Member Garcia, if you're ready to go, feel free to.
Sure, and I do have some questions. I just, I was not at the previous meeting, so I may have missed some things specifically about this. So if I'm off, please correct me. And so my first question is, what kind of application process will be going through for this? How do people apply? And our traditional outlet programs, we were shown kind of like an application process. Will these folks go through an application process just through the district HR department, the way that most districts are handling it?
Correct. They'll go through our correct. They'll go through our hiring procedures, based on just not just for the program, but just the teacher position itself. What we've done in our school district, just because of the teacher shortages, with the teacher shortages, we've hired candidates based on administrative teams. So we don't solely rely on the principal and even his or her school teacher team to hire teachers. As a district, we kind of lead that. So I'll have 3 principals, for example, interviewing people, and they have to reach consensus whether or not we want to pursue this individual. I mean, it same goes to standard certified teachers too, to be honest with you, but they do have to go through that vetting system.
So as a follow-up to application, so the program then, because you had mentioned that you would not be doing special education teachers at this point, is it everyone else other than SPED teachers? So will you be doing SEI teachers, K through 8 teachers, content specialists, or teachers? So like PE teachers, that kind of stuff. So is it everybody except for SPED that we're not hiring through this program?
Well, I'll let Dr. Westhoff add to this, but Our intent is not to have special ed. I think what Dr. Westhoff was alluding to is we've already brainstormed, had a thought about having a special ed only cohort, possibly the 21-22 school year, in which we would come back to you for consideration. We are looking for really anybody. We're capping the program to 24 students.
Mhm.
I think we targeted 20 to 24, but the max will be at 24. We're not going to prevent somebody who's going for a special ed position to be part of this program. It'll eventually be the 24 we identify. We've already hired teachers, alternative pathway teachers, since November for next year, and that's going to be our #1 priority to see whether or not they would want to participate in this program. We do have existing staff members in our school system with a degree in another field, but they may be occupying different jobs, like a school office job I know of, a paraprofessional job. We're going to allow them for really the second priority. We do have some individuals that those examples I shared with you where they may leave the profession altogether because they can't, either their families can't afford to continue to go to school at night, or they want to spend time with their family, like that younger gentleman I gave you example of, and they can't afford the time, in the evenings. And we're going to give those priorities, and then we're going to seek out other individuals based on that availability through number 24. And we're not targeting a specific grade level or subject area. We will allow the SPED teacher. We have 4 SPED coaches designated at the district level who currently works and does a lot of these job embedded components with.
Did we lose you?
Justin got stuck.
I think we might have lost him. I'll try to pick up until he joins us.
Oh,
Is
there
he
he is.
back?
Yeah.
Okay. I think what he was going to say is that we have these 4 special education coaches, and we've actually embedded them into our Begin program. The interesting part about special education, and I was a SPED teacher, so there are so many types of special education teachers. When you have a first grade teacher, you basically have a set of skills you can teach a first grade teacher that they need. When you have special education, you have self-contained CCB, self-contained academic resource, all those ranges. And so we're very interested in having a program designed just for SPED, because we think we have enough tools that we might be able to meet a lot of good needs, and SPED teachers are golden. But with this model just starting up, if we do have the lucky opportunity of having a SPED teacher apply, then we have resources to support them, as well as some of the basic gen ed curriculum that they'll pick up as well.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. The other question I had was at the end, well, first, you mentioned that you weren't going to be necessarily explicit in opening this up for special education teachers. Is that the same for SEI program teachers or secondary language learner teachers, or will they be also looped in to that? Just because
they'll be included in that. They'll be in part of our gen ed model.
They'll be part of the gen ed model. Okay.
Yeah.
And I apologize, my systems told me I was unstable, so I may have lost you guys. My apologies.
I had the same question for Vail a couple years ago when they came through regarding whether or not the certification would then be portable, meaning if they left your district, are they going to be able to go to another district? And maybe that's a catcher question. I don't know.
They are within Arizona, and
Okay.
we recognize that. So of course we want to retain all of those teachers in Washington, but we understand that circumstances change in an individual's life, whether they're in the bridge program or whatnot, but it would be within Arizona.
And then the same would be true, speaking as a teacher who came from another state over, that state would have to deal with the complexities of whether or not it would be an acceptable cross-state certificate. Okay. And Justin, sorry, I know you are the king of data on this kind of stuff. What kind of data do you have regarding your current program as far as retention of those teachers? You don't have any?
Man, that's a good question.
I can tell you a little bit if you'd like me to jump in here, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie.
Generally, we start off with between 110 and 140 first year teachers and Begin. Many of them are, well, throughout the first year, you lose some naturally that they find out teaching's not for them. We also have some of our teachers are involved in athletics, coaching after school, and it's an after school model. We don't do a sub-release model for it. And so we try to balance that out with their other interest, which is coaching. So sometimes a few of them will drop out because of that. We have a few people that will tell us that they want to work on masters. And we work really hard to help them understand that would be a good thing to do after your third year and not your first year of teaching. But everybody is in charge of their own self. So generally the number that goes from begin 1 to begin 2 is around the, it's been 80 to 95-ish. So we probably lose about 25 or 30 for those reasons. And then between begin 2 and begin 3, I teach begin 3, and Carla that's listening is a begin 2. And we stay anywhere between 65 and 80 in begin 3. So there are people that started in begin 1 that are still in the district. They might not finish the program. It's not mandatory.
Oh, it's not, okay.
That's the number. That's the numbers I would know. I wouldn't know about all of them in their employment.
Yeah, the begin program is voluntary. We do try to provide an incentive because we want individuals to participate. Right. So sometimes they're a single parent or whatever, there's circumstances, or they decide to go for their master's and potentially drop out. As far as, I don't have the exact numbers, and my apologies, but those in begin versus new teachers who don't participate in begin, we have a higher retention rate, employment retention rate for those who are in the begin program. The same can be said for the start program versus alternative pathways who are not in the start program. Because both the begin and the start, although they're mostly voluntary, we still provide resources to those individuals regardless. But it does require them to do some stuff after school hours. And if you're already going to, if you're attending a local university for 4 days a week, you're unlikely to participate in teaching and your college and our district programs. So I can only tell you that those who attend our current existing programs, we have higher retention than those who do not.
Right. One of the things I noticed is that the contract is expanded. Clearly, you mentioned not only prior to school, but during October break, spring break, and 2 days after school, which sounds like the worst nightmare to me. But anyway, going to PD 2 days after you release your kids. But are those teachers being compensated for that extra additional days on their contract?
No, they're going to have a base salary, a
right.
contract, and their own work calendar. A couple of things that, as that large committee of various stakeholders, one of our interests was to avoid evening and Saturdays.
Right.
So those individuals, yes, they may have an extended work year,
right.
but they don't have a bunch of stuff within that 9-month period that they're currently doing, regardless of what program they're doing. The other part too, through informal channels, many of those individuals going from a different field are already accustomed to working 12 months a year. Mm-hmm. So the individual with a degree in accounting, for example, in the accounting field, they're not familiar with the 9-month calendar, so they'll still get some 6 weeks off or whatever during the summer participating in our bridge.
So I just, so you know, I have concerns with that because it's an extra workload, and they're doing professional development, which is going towards a program, going towards a certification. But even for some of the mentor programs, I think people do get paid the extra 10 days a year that they are built into their contracts. I've seen in other districts where they add the 10 days, but they do pay them for those extra days. They have to turn in, they have to sign in, sign out. So it seems like it is a cost benefit. They're getting exposure, they're getting a position, and so forth. But it's a little bit scary. I know my first year teaching, I had to do the SEI a 90-hour during my first October break. And so I didn't spend any time with my infant son that entire time, but I was paid to do it. And so it kind of, so I had questions on that. I guess my other kind of concern, and maybe it's not a true concern in your district, but when you said that a lot of the substitutes would be pushed in while teachers were going to some of these folks to the program would be going, is substitute coverage not an issue in Washington Like you have plenty of subs to cover those days, an extra 24?
We had about a 92% fill rate. April and May are usually our toughest times, as well as other districts. So I don't know what this would have been this year, but we have about a 92% fill rate, which is pretty high. We'll have these dates designated, so we'll secure the subs in advance. The 2 Wednesdays, by the way, they're not going to be, the 2 times a month are not going to be full days.
Right.
So our district has Wednesday PLC days. So they'll be getting a sub from the morning till 1 o'clock or whenever the student release day is. The sub will actually get paid a full day for that day. And we'll return those individuals likely back to the school during their PLC. The other Wednesday is going to be the opposite, where not every PLC Wednesday is at the site specific. They're district wide, and part of the district wide is, all math teachers will go here, all first grade teachers go here potentially, or whatever. A simple example, we'll pull the bridge teachers together as well. And I failed to mention this before from your other concern, Ms. Garcia. This does one of our interests is not to charge tuition.
Right.
So they will, although they may not get extra compensation for the extra work days, they also won't have tuition that they would in the other models. And I also wanted to add that when we hire an alternate pathway teacher, they still have the opportunity not to join the bridge. They can do the post-bac evening 2-year model as well, and we'll support them as well through our START program. So it's not just one only program, it's multiple programs. So whatever meets that individual's needs would be applicable. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my sub question, to go back to that first one, was not necessarily about, I just worry that a lot of times you see in school districts that veteran teachers are having to cover for other teachers, and then it becomes a workload for those teachers. And so that's always a concern with these type of programs for me, is the unseen workload issue that happens to veteran teachers of having to scoop up teachers with no experience in this type of atmosphere. It's kind of numerated, but it's felt. It pulses from a school when you have so many alt ed teachers or teachers without any experience walking into a classroom. One of the last sites I worked at, we had a third flip, and so those other 2/3 jobs expanded, and it doesn't show up on any data points other than they're pushing through, having to support that's it. And that's great you have so many subs to cover, and adding 24 doesn't seem like it'll
I add one thought to that. We have had pretty good luck in our system with retirees if they know they're going to be part of a special program. And so once we know that we're approved, there are some retirees that are interested in being assigned to a person, and that way it's the same teacher that goes into that classroom. So we would do a hard push to find those that would have that interest, and that would be a calendar they could have. That would be predictable as well.
That's my mom's job position right now. Sounds great. That's what she does for a living now.
Yeah.
I think my last question was your target. Your target is 24, and for this upcoming year, 20 to 24. Yeah. Okay.
That's
Those
correct.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Reedy, that means you are up.
Hector, a quick clarifying question. Am I asking questions about the program right now, or can I go ahead and move to asking questions regarding the efficacy data?
Both and all.
Okay.
And also this goes for you and Member Garcia and everybody else. If you forget something or something occurs to you while these other questions come up, I'll make sure there's time at the end there before we start having motions. But yeah, anything and everything right now.
Great. First, I just want to say I appreciate the work and the thought that has gone into the program, and I especially appreciate the passion that I hear behind your description of it and how committed you are to supporting new teachers in your district.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions regarding the efficacy data. On the slides that you shared, there were some tables that were not a part of the original submission, the ones that had it was disaggregated by first, fourth, math 7, 8, and CCB, I think were the categories. Were those the only grade levels where benchmarks marks were administered?
No, they were not. It was just a sample size. I was made aware of a couple potential questions that the board may have, and so I went back to my data source and pulled those as examples just to answer those questions before they were asked.
So then my question would be, so do you have a general sense of so it's the average was shared? Do you have an end value of the number of teachers that exhibited gains for those grade levels that were assessed using the benchmark? Like, do you know the number? I want to know, did all teachers have gains? Most teachers have gains? Did some teachers have great gains and some not have very many? Just in terms of the averages that were shared on the chart.
You know, most of what I shared with you, especially the grade levels, there were what 90 to 100 teachers, I think, overall, if I'm not mistaken. So I think with any data, I don't have exactly on me right now to answer that question, but just in general, you know, an average is only an average, so you're going to have some outliers both ways. The bell curve will exist with that sample size of 90 to 100. I would anticipate. I just don't have the details per teacher on me.
Sure. I was just curious if some grade levels, participants in your programs, if they did better. In some grade levels, the grade level data that you shared with first, fourth, and math 7-8, that was, it looked compared to the regular teachers or the standard certificated teachers that they had had comparable gains. And I was just curious if you saw that trend across all grade levels.
You know, I saw one where there was, even the CCB I showed you on one there was a considerable difference. And so
Sure.
Why that anomaly? I had one where there was only one person and it was extremely high. And I think I had a couple where they're low. I mean, there's so many things that are involved in that data. It included our ineffective teachers, regardless if they were standard certified or alternative pathway that we may have been on an improvement plan with. So I did not exclude them. What you saw was every teacher under different, you know, on all different circumstances. Again, it was more of an overview than it was real detail to answer your question.
Okay.
If I can jump in just real quick, I don't have a specific number for you, but one of the things that I noticed when he shared the data with me, just the sample size, we've had a math initiative in our district for the last 2 years. We probably have 2/3 of our teachers trained. And so it's interesting just for me to even see the math numbers. And my curiosity was piqued about which ones out of the 3-year induction people had actually completed the math training. So there's a lot of variables that go into that I think will be exciting for us to track should we be approved to continue, because I think there's the SEI piece, the SPED piece, and also our specific district initiatives about phonics and math, reading and math. Will be interesting to track that out. So thank you for bringing that question up.
Sure. Quick question about your benchmark specifically. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Is it teacher created? Is it, do you work with a vendor to provide it? Can you just describe that a little bit?
Dr. Westop, do you want to assist?
Sure. I'm not the assessment person, I'm the PD person. So we have our teachers in the K1-2 do Acadians, and we have all the benchmarks that go along with that. We of course are doing CFAs that different grade levels are creating, not only in their teams, but systemically in reading and math for grades 2 through 8. We have School City, which has some questions that they can use for the CFAs. We try to keep it as standardized, anything that's systemic, as standardized as possible. So I guess it's a hodgepodge.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Thanks.
We do have other individuals from Washington Elementary School District on this Zoom meeting. So if anybody has more to add, you're welcome to do so. Or if you need more or deeper into those answers, let us know too, okay?
Okay, Member Robledo, you are up.
So first of all, thank you so much for the application. The information that you provided was definitely more than what we would expect on this type of application. And I concur, the passion for this field and for the work that you do is definitely seen and displayed in the way that you presented yourselves today. So thank you for your passion and for the love that you have for your students. I did have a question on the support. So once the candidates are in the program and they are enrolled in this program and they go through it, most of and all of our EPPs will have some type of support in place. So what type of remediation plans do you have, or what systems are you going to have in place if you feel a candidate is not performing or not meeting the expectations that you have in place? Would that candidate continue to go on in year 2? Would you have, I just want to know what happens to that candidate and what's additional support on top of the mentors and the coaches that you're already going to have. What other criteria or what other things do they need to meet in order to continue participating in the program?
I'd be happy to answer that, Justin, if you'd like me to.
I mean, I just, oh, go ahead, Meg.
No, you go right ahead.
I was just going to begin by starting to share what we do in general and what our priority is for Washington with 1,400 teachers. You know, I would say that my first part of the answer is everything's an individual basis. Depends on progress individuals are making, you know, their willingness and et cetera. But one of the things our school districts does before we get to the state statute on dealing with poor performers is we make it a priority to exhaust our efforts with that individual. Dr. Westhoff shared with you already that we have not just what we're going to designate for the bridge program, but we have district instructional coaches, content specialists. We also have one at every school, a school instructional coach, in which we provide strong mentorship, coaching, and that's besides being in the Begin program and the START program and so forth. With having 1,400 teachers, we do get to a point where we have to make a decision what's best for the students of our school district, and that may require us putting somebody receiving an ineffective evaluation, receiving that improvement plan with additional resources, but we try to provide as many as we can, exhaust our efforts even before it gets to that level. And Dr. Westhoff may want to describe some of that.
I would say probably the, besides everything Justin said, which we do on a normal basis, I think that ongoing assessment of each candidate throughout that first year is going to be key, because as we're gathering data from not only the bridge coach, but from the school coach and the administrator, we will be targeting certain trainings or differentiating certain trainings maybe to helps some of the bridge participants go a little more slowly. They may not be able to move as quickly as others, and they will end up being more targeted in the kind of support that they get. Year 2, I see being very differentiated, because just as having worked with beginning teachers for so long, you have some that just fly, and then you have others that need a couple of years to revisit it and do it again to see how the pattern and the rhythms start working. But that's all built in the way we've kind of designed the coursework to cycle through. And there will be a deep look during year 2 to see if they should go back and either do a second year 2 or repeat year 1. And we do that a lot with our Begin teachers too. They can go back and repeat Begin 2 if we find that they are missing some of the content and their administrators are concerned about their performance. So I think our safety net for all teachers as far as their development and their struggles is pretty solid generically, and I think this program will be even more intensive.
We're going to invest a lot of time and resources. We don't want to start over the following year. We want to retain these individuals.
And I think another question would be, besides the evaluations and besides the observations that you're going to be doing with these candidates, you mentioned that you weren't going to give assignments. So basically there is no grading for these candidates. What other tools do you plan to use in order to assess to assess their skills in what they're doing? Would you be using data that the students would be, these assessments that you already use, would you be using that as a criteria to assess the students' progression through or the candidate's progression through the program? Or what other criteria would you be using to assess their effectiveness?
Well, every training is designed to have some content to it, in the sense that they would be doing things in the training with the content, but that's real different than going back to the classroom and applying it in its use. So that's where the coaching piece starts to pick up. After the training, and the bridge coaches will be following through with each candidate into the classroom to see how it transfers from quote book learning and the training into application into the classroom. That's why we think it's an important net for the principal and the site coach and the bridge coaches to know what's happening each month, so that the evidence that they're applying in the classroom, whether successfully or struggling, is a well-known variable. We do lots of case studies. We do lots of watching lessons together and then analyzing them together in the training. We do small group breakouts where they talk about problem-solving scenarios. So we have a pretty good handle on how to judge the in-session knowledge gathering, but that's that magical part of going from the training session into classroom application, that it's going to take that team approach, and pretty consistent in classroom following through and observations.
If I can add to that, Dr. Westhoff, we also have a data cycle component. We work, every grade level has common planning periods and required data meetings within their grade level. And regardless of the type of certificate you have, you're involved in that. So there will be a constant review of various data, not just the benchmark data that I shared with you today, but student work, common informative assessments,
Right.
et cetera, as well.
And that's done on a weekly basis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I have any other questions at the moment. I may have additional ones later on, but for now, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Aragon, you're up.
I don't think I have any other questions other than what my colleagues have already asked. So thank you for your application. I appreciate it.
And that means, Madam Chair, that's up to you.
Well, thank you. It's nice to have you here, and I certainly appreciate your dedication, the commitment and passion, as we've talked about, for your teachers and for your students. So I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned there are 2.0 FTE staff. Are these the mentor teachers that will be assigned to the bridge teachers?
Justin, did you want to answer that, or you want me to?
You're welcome to. I had myself on mute, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Right now it's a 2.0 on paper, but it's actually going to be 3 to 4 bodies. We're going to, we have some people on staff that are very committed to the program, and they are current coaches. And so they will be part bridge coaches and part generic coaches with their current job. And then we will be filling a 0.5 bridge coach position for the junior high piece, because we have a primary expert that's going to be part of the program and an intermediate junior high person. But we also wanted to bring in another content specific person who has a background in coaching and or administration to be part of that model.
Okay, thank you. So I still am trying to get a good handle on the certifications that you're going to be focusing on, and maybe that's the question. Are you focusing on providing the bridge program to support particular certifications, or is it just whoever comes in the door and how it works out?
We're not focused on one particular type of certificate, like early childhood, for example, or K-8's probably going to be the most typical. Just because I don't know if you've seen the Department of Ed reports, but most emergency certified teachers are actually in the elementary level, and that probably applies with Washington as well. So we're going to get a lot of those as well, but we're looking more for the actual teacher candidate, not necessarily what position he or she is going to occupy. Our focus in the handouts through the application are going to focus more on the pedagogy. With our content specialist, who's not included in that 2.0, it's in addition to, we'll focus if we have individuals within that math position, for example, or that special ed position.
Okay. And I guess one of my significant questions is, how is if you do have special education teachers and you bring them into this program and looking towards their getting an in-state certificate, what is your curriculum going to look like for them?
Well, we've talked about that happening should we have an applicant this time. And that's where we would weave in the special ed coaches that we currently have on staff. They have, as I've said previously, they have been working with my Begin teachers on, my Begin program has a certain curriculum to it each year, but because we weave in the 4 special education coaches, they take the special education teachers and they weave in all the specifics related to special ed that their teachers need to be first and second year teachers in special education. So they would be heavily involved in this. They've been involved in some of the planning discussions as well.
IP would be an
Okay, but then,
example. Oh, sorry.
well, I was going to ask, so then if you're, but your Begin teachers are already in a certification program, or isn't that correct? And even your START teachers are already in a certification program.
Right.
So that was my question then, is it would just be coaching for the special education teachers
No,
that would
they would be
enroll
content
into Bridges.
presenters as well as coaches. The 4 special ed coaches would be content presenters as well as coaches for the special ed areas.
Ms. Peasley, on the START, I think the better example would be the START program where, we have teachers with the alternate pathway certificate that hasn't even started their first class in the evening, and they're 3 weeks into the school year. So our special ed coaches do intensive trainings on IEPs for the first quarter, and maybe even through the first semester. I know many times they're actually co-writing the IEPs with those teachers. Having 4 district level coaches, and that doesn't even include the other leadership in the special ed department, has been tremendously helpful to the success of not just the Begin teachers, but also the current alternative pathway certified teachers. Matter of fact, they probably get stronger and more job embedded coaching from our SPED coaches than any other teacher, hence probably why some of the data was positive when you compare to non-START teachers within the SPED program.
We would have to, of
Okay.
course, look at all the state certification guidelines to see if there was any pieces that we would need to make sure that they had exposure to that would be above and beyond, our program that we've designed. Is that what you were kind of alluding to? Some of the element that would be.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because the content in special education is so uniquely different than the content that comes with just elementary or even a content specialist. Because with the elementary, with the early childhood, with content, social science, ELA, social studies, those are living, breathing, you're dealing with that content all day long, all year long. In special education, it is so diverse. You may or may not have a student with particular conditions or a set of experiences that for much or if any of that school year. And so that's why I was referring to that. My next question is, what is the teacher evaluation tool that your Washington Elementary District is using? We've talked about the evaluation process. Do you have your own model, or do you use Makisa or Danielson?
We do have our own model. It's based preliminary over the INTAS standards. It was really developed by, I would say, a committee of 60 years ago when teacher evaluations became more prominent and required nationally and in the state. And so we revised it using those standards. We also applied some of our professionalism, productive culture components to that evaluation. But most of it's specific to the INTAS standards.
Okay. And then my last is just a comment. I mean, you've talked about your data, and I really hope that in the future that you gather data on these three candidates in these three programs as it relates to the grade levels, the grade bands, ELL, ethnicity. I mean, Washington Elementary is known for having a huge ELL program. You were one of the first districts in the state to receive refugees back, I think, even in the 80s. So you've been very ELL oriented, but I would sure hope to see that you have that kind of information to share with the state about your programs as your new teachers are going through these.
We normally differentiate by our subgroups a lot, so that data will be accessible, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Catcher, that concludes my questions and comments.
Okay, members, so I think I'll open it back up to see if any other members had any other questions or comments that they just thought of while everybody else was going through. So if you have any, feel free to chime in.
So can I ask a question, kind of going after Chairwoman Peasley's question about certification lineup? So I guess my biggest concern with these programs is that they're portable certificates. And I think part of the intent of these was to support rural school districts that really had no access to do things online with educators and get them to stay there and be kind of a, an anchor to their community. But if they're not necessarily aligned with what other students are doing, even the other programs that we have coming that are online with this, a lot of, I know Justin mentioned it, but a lot of time online, a lot of time away, and they're paying for it. So my concern goes is that it pivots to another school district. So I'm an Isaac teacher. So if I have a Washington teacher go through your program 2-3 years, decide they want to go to Isaac, very similar population, makes sense, kind of, very small, for us, a very small urban, but they would be eligible after 150 hours in a 2-year program to then get a Arizona State credential that could move to another school district. How do we know, as like a secondary ed person, how do we know that they are prepared for just the content knowledge along with all the other spectrum of things? So those were some of my concerns. And I guess the question was more, and Chairwoman Peasley kind of brought it up, like what credential are they working towards? I think a lot of educators start their path that way. Which one are they starting towards, and then they build it out? Are there any kind of possible ways, like are they cohorting together to work together in small groups, which I know is very common in some of the alt ed prep programs? Or is it just all of it is going to be applicable to all 24 that go through the PD?
A couple things I think with Dr. Westhoff alluded to, our staff designated to the Bridge program are going to vary based on their experience, and I think we have probably over 90 years of experience with those individuals. One has more of a background in primaries, one intermediate/junior high, and we have a vacancy that we're exploring for the middle school component. So there's going to be some areas in which all of them are attending, There's going to be some where it is going to be cohort, and there's going to be some that it's more differentiated and individual basis. Everybody's readiness, especially on these alternative pathway certificates, vary, and we recognize that, and we can't just group them all in one cohort. And here you go, there's 24, students in it. So I think it's all of the above, and it's going to vary within our program. Dr. Westhoff, you have something to add to it?
No, we don't know who our audience is quite yet at this point. So we're trying to be flexible and fluid to be able to reach out and get any resources that we might need that would develop these teachers to be the most competent they could be. There could be down the road maybe some very specific things that have to be added as we develop it. We wouldn't be shy about doing that. It's just a little hard to answer that question right now because we don't know our audience quite yet. Generically, most of them will probably be a K-8 general ed certificate. That's been our pattern.
Member Garcia, I'll also just sort of highlight from what the way that the programs, or at least the way that the statute was structured, in the way that the statute envisions it happening, and then how that's reflected in the rule, is that the individuals upon completion of these classroom-based programs, in many cases would leave with this classroom-based certificate, which, as you mentioned, is portable. The requirements for that certificate are, in addition to completing the classroom-based program, demonstration of subject knowledge and professional knowledge proficiency, and those are through all the ways that we have available to educators now, which is the undergrad degree, the passing the test, the teaching experience, the work experience, et cetera, and so forth. And then for these classroom-based folks, there's that added layer, which I think Justin alluded to earlier in his presentation, which is that these folks are required to have, if they're teaching a subject that's tested by the statewide assessment, to have evidence that they're performing at grade level or that they're making a year's worth of growth with those students. And then also that they have full-time teaching experience, what they should get through the program. So just a couple of things that I wanted to make sure from the way that the statute and the rule envisions it, that will also have to be carried out. That might be helpful to answer that question too.
I did want to add one point. I don't know if it was, I heard it wrong because my computer is kind of soft. It is 150 hours per year in the program, not for the 2 years together. And I thought I heard someone say maybe it was 150 hours for the 2 years. I just wanted to clarify that if that was what I heard.
And that goes back to my question. Thank you very much. And it's so the entire program you mentioned, it's the 2 years of the bridge program. Then you said they go into begin.
They can go into begin. We're still trying to figure out where they will be developmentally. We've talked about them skipping begin 1, which is kind of the year of learning how to manage my life as a teacher, and go right into begin 2, which is continuing that skill development. When they have their feet on the ground and they're ready to grow, content wise. So that we'll have to kind of make a judgment, but they could have up to 3 to 5 years of support depending on their skill needs.
Okay, so I understand it's up to 3 to 5 years of support, but a program completer, if you will, is just 2 years.
Or I think Justin wrote in this opening thing that it could be 2 to 3 years.
It's intended to be a 2-year program, but we recognize, similar to the post-bac, where it could be approved for 1 more year, depending on the individual and the circumstances of the Department of Ed, that it could be a 3rd year. But our intent is it to be a 2nd year. And as far as the 3 to 5 year support, I think it's not necessarily for the bridge program. It's just for all of our teachers who are 3 through 5 years. Whether they're standard certified, they go through and get a post-bac degree from a local university or go through our bridge program.
So then if a teacher didn't meet at the coming down to the end of the 2nd year, if a teacher in the bridge program didn't perform to the district's satisfaction, the district would withhold that IR?
Yeah.
Okay,
And well, we would also follow, if the person was not performing and meeting expectations of the district, we'd also have to comply with other statutes regarding performance.
okay. Thank you. Catcher, before we move on to the recommendation, we would appreciate it if you would review the criteria that the committee must consider before it makes its recommendation.
Sure, Madam Chair and members, I will even pull up the statute, which really drives the committee's charge that comes from the board. So pursuant to 15-553, the board's charged with adopting rules, policies, and procedures to be administered by the department for the classroom-based prep program. The rules may not be more restrictive or require more than is prescribed and shall only facilitate that process. And then there's a few items, and that includes some of the things we've already talked about in terms of certification requirements, and a requirement for the school district or charter school to submit data supporting the efficacy of the school district's or charter school's teacher preparation program, and they may contract with a third-party provider. And then upon the submission of verification that a school district or charter school met those requirements, the state board shall issue the certificate, but also that applies to approving program applications. So that about sums it up.
Thank you. I was gonna say, it's your meeting, Catcher, unmute.
I was kind of waiting. I thought it sounded like you were ready to take the reins, so I didn't want to cut you off. So if there's not any more discussion or questions, as you alluded to, Member Peasley, now's about that time of the meeting when we have a motion. So the motions, as per usual, would be a recommendation to the full board for consideration for either approval of the application or denial of the application. And the board is next meeting on April 20th, and we hope to have this one on that meeting agenda for the materials that are going out later this week. And as a reminder, the committee could also do like a provisional approval, which would make the program valid for 2 years rather than 6 years, contingent upon the applicant addressing whatever deficiencies are identified. So that's kind of what's on the table. We do need to make a recommendation today. So I think I will take a step back then and let the committee members discuss and hear for any questions, or if you need some assistance on anything. I do think if we do have a motion and a second, I will do a roll call vote, and then everybody will have their opportunity to say their vote, but also explain it and potentially put anything on the record that you feel necessary.
Catcher, I move at this time to approve Washington Elementary School District's application, or to make a recommendation that the state board approve it.
I will second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Member Aragon and a second from Member Peasley to recommend to the full board approval of Washington Elementary's educator preparation, classroom-based educator preparation program. So now we'll do a roll call vote. Member Garcia?
I'm muted.
No.
Unmuted. Sorry. So I'm gonna vote no, and I want to explain it. I think you all are used to me voting. I have legitimate concerns about the 2 weeks before putting folks in front of kids, and the amount of additional 150 hours that will go into a first year teacher's exposure to these students, to our students. So I would like that to be entered into the record, to that concern. I'm hoping that as this program progresses, and as most of the district administration has mentioned, that it will be evolving and changing based on what kind of applicants they get. And so I'm hopeful to see that after this goes through, and in 6 months, we can see some great data and what that may look like if this passes. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Reedy?
You're muted, Kristen.
Yeah, sorry about that. I can't alter this motion, correct? I only have to respond to this one.
Yes.
Okay, so I am going to say no to this particular motion. However, I want to let you know that I would support a provisional recommendation, and it's just that there is an opportunity for Washington Elementary School District to provide us with additional reliable and valid efficacy data that's a bit more disaggregated, as well as to provide retention data in this program. And I would support a provisional so that we could come back in 2 years and celebrate their hopeful success.
Member Robledo?
I say yes.
Member Aragon?
Yes.
And Chair Peasley.
I say yes, but I would agree with Member Reedy that, as I said in my comment, we really do need to see that data that Washington is so very good at collecting. And I hope that they have that information that they bring sooner on the status of the numbers of completers of teachers in the program, and the disaggregated data for the success and the improvement of the students. So yes.
By a vote of 3 ayes and 2 nays, the motion passes, and the recommendation for approval is now going to the full board. We will include those comments in the committee's recommendations to the board, as well as the notes and the link to this meeting. As I mentioned, for our folks over in Washington L, this is going to go on the board's agenda for April 20th, assuming that technology allows us to hold that meeting still. We'll be in touch. There's no, while I have you here, there's no requirement for you to present, and actually it's probably going to be something that's on consent, but we'll be in touch in case questions come up or if there's anything else that we need from you on the way. And then following that board meeting, we'll be in communication. We'll give you an official letter as to the board's decision and next steps after that. So I really want to thank you all the committee members. We're on the last agenda item now, which is future meeting dates and items for future agendas. I don't have anything other than to say I really, really appreciate the committee members. I always already appreciate how much time you put into this committee, and especially during this time. And I also, the folks over in Washington now, Justin and so forth, I appreciate you being flexible. I know this is a little bit more difficult to present your program in this fashion. So really appreciate you guys being flexible with us and allowing us to be able to still review the application and get the business done in this fashion. So with that, unless there's any other questions or concerns, you should wave at me right now, but I don't see any. So
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, there we go.
Raise
Okay.
my hand. I don't know where it is. Can't find it. Anyhow, yes, I do have a question. Do we have an update on the status of the rule change request to move this process back to ADE?
Madam Chair, so we do have that rule open. The board opened that rule. We're still kicking around with ADE. And they were working on some comments for us as of a few weeks ago. Obviously, a lot of that stuff got put on hold. So that's still up in the air right now. The application window for alt prep programs is closed right now, and we're going to reopen it in the fall. And we're going to reopen it in the fall if we have the shift to ADE done or not, because we just owe it to those folks who want to have a program up. So we're going to try to get that rule done before then. But that's the status of that rule right now.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful for us to know, Catcher. We appreciate that. All right, then.
Member Aragon, did you have something?
You know what? I'm going to refrain. I'll at this point.
Okay. We could always call me. Okay, so seeing no further business, members, I think we're going to adjourn the meeting here at 3:42 and call it a day. I appreciate you all and hope you stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Yes,
questions
everyone in
and your
Washington, the
comments.
best.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Congrats.
Thank you. Be safe.